Chapter 1. The Echoes. Begin. The train rattled through the misty English countryside, its rhythm a steady heartbeat against the grey afternoon. Hercule Poirot sat by the window, his gloved hands resting atop a neatly folded newspaper, his sharp eyes tracing the blur of hedgerows and skeletal trees. He was not a man given to idle travel, and this journey to Ashwood Manor was no exception. In his coat pocket lay a letter, its edges worn from repeated reading, its words both urgent and vague. Monsieur Poirot, I implore your aid. The footsteps come at night, unseen, relentless, a harbinger of doom. I fear for my life and the lives of those around me. Please come at once. Ashwood Manor, Dorset. L.A. The initials L.A. had piqued his curiosity, as had the lack of a proper signature. A summons so cryptic demanded investigation, and Poirot's little grey cells were already stirring. The train screeched to a halt at a desolate platform marked Ashwood Halt. Poirot disembarked, his polished shoes clicking against the weathered wood. A chauffeur in a drab overcoat awaited him, tipping his cap with a murmured, "This way, sir." The drive to the manor was silent, save for the crunch of gravel beneath the tyres and the distant cawing of crows. As the car wound up a tree-lined lane, Ashwood Manor loomed into view, a sprawling Gothic pile of stone and shadow, its windows glinting like watchful eyes. The front door creaked open before the car had fully stopped, revealing a tall, wiry man in his late 50s. His silver hair was swept back, and his piercing blue eyes darted nervously toward the darkening sky. "Monsieur Poirot," he said, extending a hand that trembled ever so slightly. "I am Lord Lawrence Ashwood. Thank you for coming." Poirot inclined his head, studying the man. "The pleasure, it is mine, Lord Ashwood. But tell me, your letter spoke of footsteps. What is this mystery that troubles you so?" Lord Ashwood hesitated, glancing over his shoulder as if expecting someone, or something, to emerge from the shadows of the hall. "Not here," he said quietly. "Come inside. There are ears about." The grand foyer was a cavern of oak and faded tapestries, its air heavy with the scent of old wood and wax. A chandelier flickered overhead, casting jagged shadows across the walls. Lord Ashwood led Poirot to a drawing-room where a fire crackled in the hearth, its warmth doing little to dispel the chill that clung to the house. "Sit, please," Ashwood said, gesturing to a high-backed chair. Poirot complied, crossing his legs with precision as his host paced before the fire. "It began 2 weeks ago," Ashwood started, his voice low. "Every night, just past midnight, I hear them. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate, echoing through the corridors. They stop outside my door, then vanish. No one is there, Monsieur Poirot. No one I can see." Poirot's moustache twitched as he leaned forward. "And you are certain these are not the steps of a servant, perhaps, or a guest?" Ashwood shook his head vigorously. "Impossible! The servants sleep in the east wing, far from my rooms. And my guests, my family, they've heard it too. My sister, Lady Beatrice, swears it's a ghost. My nephew Charles thinks it's a prank. But last night—" He paused, swallowing hard. "Last night my valet Thomas disappeared. His bed was empty this morning, his coat still on the hook. And the footsteps, they were louder, closer." Poirot's eyes gleamed with interest. "Disappeared, you say? And these footsteps, do they leave a trace? A mark upon the floor, perhaps? No, Ashwood replied, wringing his hands. That's the devil of it. The floors are spotless, yet the sound is unmistakable. It's as if the house itself is walking. A sudden clatter interrupted them. A tray slipping from the hands of a young maid who had entered unnoticed. She gasped, her pale face flushing as she knelt to gather the spilled teacups. "Forgive me, my lord," she stammered. "I didn't mean to—" "It's all right, Ellen," Ashwood said, though his tone was sharp. "Leave it. Bring fresh tea." As the girl scurried away, Poirot's gaze lingered on her retreating figure. "She is nervous, this Ellen. Why, I wonder?" Ashwood waved a hand dismissively. "The staff are on edge. They've heard the tales, old stories about this house. Superstition, nothing more. Perhaps," Poirot mused, tapping a finger against his chin. "But Hercule Poirot does not dismiss what he cannot yet explain. Tell me, Lord Ashwood, who resides here besides yourself?" "My sister Beatrice, and her son Charles. My ward, Miss Evelyn Grey, a distant cousin. And the staff, Ellen, the Xuanju cook, Mrs. Harrow, and until last night, Thomas. That's all." Poirot nodded, committing the names to memory. "Très bien. I shall stay the night and listen for these phantom footsteps myself. But first I must see this house, its corridors, its rooms. The solution, it hides in the details." Ashwood's shoulders sagged with relief. "Thank you, Monsieur Poirot. I pray you can end this nightmare." As the firelight danced across the walls, a faint sound drifted through the room. A single deliberate tap, like a footfall on stone. Ashwood froze, his eyes wide. Poirot smiled faintly. "Bon," he said. "It seems the mystery, it begins already." Chapter 2. The Reluctant Host. The drawing-room seemed to shrink as the echo of that solitary tap faded into silence. Lord Ashwood's face drained of colour, his hands clutching the arms of his chair, as though anchoring himself to reality. Hercule Poirot, however, remained unruffled, his keen eyes darting toward the doorway where the sound had seemed to originate. "Curieux," Poirot murmured, rising with the grace of a cat. "A sound so distinct, yet no one appears. Let us see, Lord Ashwood, what your house wishes to tell us." Ashwood stood reluctantly, his movements stiff. "It's nothing, I'm sure. A trick of the wind, perhaps." Poirot's moustache twitched with amusement. "The wind? It does not wear boots, mon ami. Come." The hallway beyond the drawing-room stretched long and dim, its walls lined with portraits of stern-faced Ashwoods glaring down from centuries past. The air was thick with dust and secrets, and Poirot's polished shoes clicked softly against the stone floor as he paused to listen. Nothing, only the distant groan of the manor settling into the night. Ashwood lingered behind, his reluctance palpable. "You'll meet the others soon enough," he said, as if to distract Poirot from his inspection. "They're an unusual lot, my family." "Unusual is the spice of life," Poirot replied, turning to face his host. "But tell me, why do you hesitate? Is there something you fear I will find?" Ashwood's jaw tightened. "I've told you all I know. The footsteps, Thomas's disappearance, it's beyond me." "Beyond you, perhaps," Poirot said, his tone gentle but firm, "but not beyond Hercule Poirot. Now, introduce me to this household. The truth, It often hides in the words of those who think they conceal it." With a resigned sigh, Ashwood led the way to a smaller parlour where the family had gathered. The room was a stark contrast to the austere grandeur of the manor, cosy, almost claustrophobic, with heavy drapes and a fire that hissed against the damp evening. 3 figures turned as the door opened, their expressions ranging from curiosity to thinly veiled hostility. Lady Beatrice Ashwood, a woman of sharp angles and sharper eyes, sat ramrod straight in a velvet chair. Her silver hair was pinned tightly, and her black dress rustled as she adjusted her posture. "Laurence," she said, her voice cutting through the air like a blade, "who is this little man?" Poirot bowed with theatrical flourish. "Hercule Poirot, at your service, madame. A detective of some repute, summoned by your brother to unravel a most intriguing puzzle." "Puzzle?" snorted a younger man sprawled across a chaise longue. Charles Ashwood, presumably the nephew, was a lanky figure with tousled dark hair and a smirk that suggested perpetual amusement. "Uncle's lost his marbles, has he? Hearing ghosts in the night?" "Charles, enough!" Ashwood snapped, but the reprimand lacked conviction. The third figure, a young woman with auburn curls and a quiet intensity, rose from her seat by the window. "I'm Evelyn Grey," she said, her voice soft but steady. "Lawrence's ward. I don't think it's a ghost, Monsieur Poirot. But something's wrong here. Thomas vanishing. It's not right." Poirot's gaze lingered on her, noting the faint tremor in her hands. "Merci, Mademoiselle Grey. Your observation, it is most welcome. And you, Lady Beatrice, what do you make of these footsteps?" Beatrice's lips thinned. "Superstition, nonsense, and bad plumbing. This house has always creaked and groaned. Laurence is jumping at shadows." "And yet," Poirot countered smoothly, "a man is missing. Shadows do not steal valets, n'est-ce pas?" Charles laughed, a harsh bark that grated on the silence. Maybe Thomas got tired of polishing Uncle's boots and ran off. Or maybe the phantom got him. He waggled his fingers mockingly. Ashwood's face darkened. "That's enough, Charles. Monsieur Poirot, I apologize for my nephew. He's charming." Poirot interjected, his smile tight. "But let us return to the matter at hand. Lady Beatrice, you hear these footsteps also?" She hesitated, her composure faltering for a fraction of a second. "I've heard something late at night, but I refuse to entertain this foolishness. And you, Monsieur Charles?" Charles shrugged. "Once or twice. Sounds like someone pacing. Probably Ellen sneaking about with the stable boy." Evelyn's cheeks flushed. "That's unkind, Charles. Ellen's terrified. She won't even leave her room after dark now." Poirot clasped his hands behind his back, pacing a small circle as the firelight danced across his polished shoes. "So, we have footsteps heard by all, yet seen by none. A missing valet, a house that whispers its discontent. Tell me, Lord Ashwood, who else might wish to disturb your peace? An enemy, perhaps? A rival?" Ashwood shook his head. "I keep to myself. No enemies that I know of." "No enemies?" Beatrice's voice was dry as dust. "What about that business with the land? Dispute years ago. Old man Harrow never forgave you." "Harrow's dead," Ashwood retorted, "and his widow's our cook. She's no threat." Poirot's eyebrows rose. "A widow in your employ, tied to a grudge? Most interesting. And where is this Mrs. Harrow now?" In the kitchen, I suppose, Ashwood said. She's been with us for years. Mum. Bon, Poirot said, turning toward the door. Then I shall begin my inquiries there. But first, I must hear these footsteps for myself. Tonight, I stay awake. Charles grinned. Good luck, old chap. Hope the phantom doesn't tiptoe into your dreams. As Poirot followed Ashwood back into the hall, he glanced at the portraits lining the walls. One, half hidden by a curtain, caught his eye. A severe woman with Evelyn's auburn hair, staring down with an expression of quiet menace. He paused, but Ashwood urged him onward. The little grey cells buzzed. The family was a tapestry of half-truths and hidden thorns, and the house itself seemed to pulse with secrets. Tonight, Poirot knew the phantom would reveal more, whether it wished to or not. Chapter 3. Whispers in the Dark. The clock in Ashwood Manor's grand hall struck 11, its chimes reverberating through the stillness like a call to judgment. Hercule Poirot stood at the foot of the sweeping staircase, a single candle in hand, its flame flickering against the encroaching shadows. Lord Ashwood had retired to his study with a glass of brandy, leaving Poirot to explore the house alone. The detective preferred it this way. Solitude sharpened his senses, and the night promised revelations. He ascended the stairs, his steps deliberate, testing the creak of each board. The manor groaned around him, its ancient bones settling into the damp Dorset night. At the landing he paused, tilting his head. Nothing yet. No phantom footsteps, no whispers. But the air felt charged, as if the house held its breath. Poirot's first stop was the corridor outside Lord Ashwood's bedchamber, where the footsteps were said to linger. The passage was narrow, its walls adorned with faded wallpaper peeling at the edges. A single window at the far end let in a sliver of moonlight, illuminating a rug worn thin by years of passage. He set the candle on a small table and examined the floor. No scuffs, no dust disturbed. Immaculate, he muttered. Too immaculate, perhaps. He knelt, running a gloved finger along the baseboard. A faint trace of polish lingered on the wood. Recently cleaned, then. Someone had taken care to erase any mark. Curieux, he said, rising. A phantom who sweeps up after itself. A soft thud echoed from below, faint but distinct. Poirot froze, his ears straining. It came again. Thud, thud. A rhythm too measured to be the wind. He extinguished the candle and moved silently toward the sound, descending the stairs with the stealth of a shadow. The noise led him to the servants' wing, a warren of narrow passages branching off the main house. A sliver of light spilled from beneath a door marked Kitchen. Poirot pressed his ear to the wood and heard a low murmur. Voices, tense and hurried. Can't keep pretending. A woman's voice snapped. He's gone, and you know it's not right. Quiet, Ellen, came a gruffer reply. You'll wake the whole house. Poirot eased the door open a crack. Inside, Ellen, the nervous maid, stood clutching a shawl, her eyes red-rimmed. Across from her was a stout woman in her 60s, her apron dusted with flour. Mrs. Harrow, the cook, no doubt. She wielded a rolling pin like a sceptre, her face etched with defiance. I heard him last night, Ellen whispered. Thomas, calling my name, from the cellar, I swear it. Mrs. Harrow snorted. Nonsense, girl. Thomas ran off, probably halfway to London by now. You're imagining things." "Then why's his coat still here?" Ellen shot back. "And those footsteps, they're not natural, Mrs. Harrow. You've heard 'em too." "The older woman's," grip tightened on the rolling pin. "Old houses creak, that's all. Now go to bed before you stir up more trouble." Ellen hesitated, then fled past Poirot without noticing him, her shawl trailing like a ghost. Mrs. Harrow turned back to her dough, muttering under her breath. Poirot stepped into the light, clearing his throat. "Bonsoir, Madame Harrow," he said, his voice smooth as velvet. "A late night for baking, non?" The cook jolted, nearly dropping the rolling pin. "Who? Oh, the detective. Lord Ashwood said you'd be poking about. What do you want?" Poirot smiled, clasping his hands behind his back. "Merely to understand. The girl, Ellen, she speaks of a missing man, Thomas. You believe he has fled?" Mrs. Harrow's eyes narrowed. "Aye, that's what I reckon. Flighty lad, always talking. About seeing the world. Took his chance and left." "And yet," Poirot said, stepping closer, "his coat remains. A curious detail, do you not think?" She shrugged, pounding the dough with unnecessary force. "Maybe he forgot it. Or maybe he didn't need it. What's it to you?" "Everything, madam, is to me," Poirot replied. "Tell me, these footsteps, Ellen says you have heard them too. What do they sound like to you?" Mrs. Harrow paused, her hands still. "Like boots on stone," she said grudgingly. "Heavy, slow. But it's just the house. Been here 20 years, heard all sorts of noises." "20 years," Poirot echoed. "Since the time of the land dispute, perhaps? With your late husband?" Her face hardened. "That's old history. Nothing to do with this." "Perhaps not," Poirot said mildly. "But history, it has a way of leaving echoes. Bonne nuit, Madame Harrow." He left her to her dough, his mind whirring. The cook's dismissal rang hollow. Her eyes had betrayed a flicker of unease. And Ellen's tale of Thomas's voice from the cellar. Intriguing. Back in the main hall, the clock struck midnight. Poirot positioned himself near the foot of the stairs, his watch in hand. The house fell silent, save for the distant drip of rain against the windows. Then, as the final chime faded, it began. Tap, 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 slow, deliberate, a sound like boots on stone drifting down from the upper corridor. Poirot's pulse quickened, though his expression remained serene. He crept upstairs, following the rhythm. The footsteps grew louder, pausing outside Ashwood's door, then stopped. Silence swallowed the night once more. Poirot examined the spot. No footprints, no dust displaced. Yet the sound had been real, unmistakable. He tapped the wall, the floor, listening for hollows or tricks of acoustics. Nothing. A door creaked open behind him, and Evelyn Grey emerged, her nightgown ghostly white in the moonlight. "Monsieur Poirot," she whispered, "you heard it too?" "Oui, mademoiselle," he said, turning to her. "And you?" She nodded, clutching a candle. "It woke me. I thought I heard a voice too, faint like a plea." "From where?" Poirot asked sharply. Evelyn pointed downward. "The cellar, I think. But I'm not sure. It's so quiet now." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "The cellar, you say? Très bien. Tomorrow we shall investigate. For now, return to your rest, mademoiselle. The night has spoken enough." As Evelyn retreated, Poirot stood alone in the corridor, the silence pressing against him. A locked room of clues was forming in his mind. Footsteps with no source, a missing man, a voice from below. The phantom was no ghost, he was certain, but its purpose, that remained a shadow, yet to be unmasked. Chapter 4. The Shadow of History. The morning dawned grey and sullen, a shroud of mist clinging to Ashwood Manor like a mourner's veil. Hercule Poirot stood at the window of the guest room assigned to him, his hands clasped behind his back, his moustache perfectly symmetrical despite the restless night. The phantom footsteps had not returned after their midnight serenade, but their echo lingered in his mind, a riddle demanding resolution. Breakfast was a subdued affair in the dining room, the long table groaning under the weight of silver and porcelain. Lord Ashwood sat at the head, his eyes sunken with fatigue. Lady Beatrice sliced her toast with surgical precision, while Charles slouched over a cup of coffee, his smirk dulled by the early hour. Evelyn Grey picked at her eggs, her gaze flickering nervously toward Poirot, who had declined food in favour of observing. "Bon matin," Poirot said, breaking the silence. "I trust you all slept well?" Charles snorted. "Well enough, until your phantom decided to tap dance outside Uncle's door. Did you catch it, Poirot? Or did it vanish into thin air like a good ghost should?" "Charles," Ashwood growled, "this is no jest." "Non," Poirot agreed, his tone mild but firm. "It is no jest, and it is no ghost. The footsteps, they are real, heard by myself, by Mademoiselle Grey, by all of you at some time. But they leave no trace. This suggests method, not magic." Lady Beatrice set down her knife with a clink. "Method? You imply someone is staging." "This nonsense!" "Précisément," Poirot said, his eyes gleaming. "But to what end? That is the question. Lord Ashwood, you have lived here all your life, oui? Tell me of this house, its history. What shadows linger in its walls?" Ashwood shifted uncomfortably. "It's an old place, built in the 17th century by my ancestors. There's little to tell. Wars, marriages, the usual." "And tragedies?" Poirot pressed. "For a house to whisper so, there must be a wound unhealed." Beatrice's lips pursed. "If you must know, there was an incident. Years ago, before Charles was born, Lawrence's uncle, Edmund Ashwood, died here. An accident, they said." "An accident?" Poirot tilted his head. "Elaborate, s'il vous plaît." Ashwood sighed, rubbing his temples. "Edmund was unstable, a recluse, obsessed with the manor's legacy. One night he fell down the cellar stairs, or so the story goes, broke his neck. I was a boy then, barely 10. The servants whispered he'd been drunk or pushed, but nothing came of it." "Pushed?" Poirot's eyebrows rose. "By whom?" "No one knows," Beatrice cut in sharply. "It was gossip, nothing more. The coroner ruled it accidental. Edmund had no enemies, only debts. And yet, Poirot mused, debts can create enemies. Who lived here then?" "My parents," Ashwood said. "Beatrice and I, a few servants, and Margaret." "Margaret?" Poirot's voice was soft, probing. "Our cousin!" Evelyn spoke up, her voice barely above a whisper. "She was Edmund's ward, like I am to Lawrence. She left after his death, Married some merchant and moved away. I never met her, but there's a portrait of her upstairs." Poirot's mind flashed to the severe woman with auburn hair he'd glimpsed the night before. Most interesting. And this cellar, where Edmund met his end, it is accessible? "Of course," Ashwood said, "though it's rarely used now. Just storage, wine, old furniture. Bon!" Poirot said, rising. "Then we shall visit it. Mademoiselle Gray mentioned a voice from below last night. Perhaps the past speaks louder than we think." Charles rolled his eyes. What next? Poirot? Digging up skeletons? "If necessary," Poirot replied with a faint smile. "The truth, it does not hide in comfort." The cellar door was tucked beneath the main staircase, its wood warped and iron hinges rusted. Ashwood fetched a key from his study, his reluctance evident as he turned the lock. The door groaned open, revealing a steep stone stair descending into darkness. A damp, earthy smell wafted up, tinged with something metallic. Poirot led the way, a lantern borrowed from the kitchen casting jagged shadows. The others followed, Ashwood grim, Beatrice impatient, Evelyn hesitant, and Charles trailing with mock bravado. The cellar was a cavernous maze of barrels and crates, cobwebs draping the beams like lace. At the foot of the stairs, Poirot paused, his light illuminating a patch of uneven stone. "Here?" he asked Ashwood. "Yes," came the reply, tight and low. "This is where they found him." Poirot knelt, examining the floor. The stone was stained dark in places, old blood perhaps, or spilled wine. He tapped it with his cane, listening. Solid, no hollows. Rising, he scanned the walls, noting a rusted iron ring embedded in one corner, a remnant of some forgotten purpose. "Anything, Monsieur Poirot?" Evelyn asked, her voice echoing faintly. "Not yet," he said, "but did the air here? It is heavy with more than dust. Tell me, mademoiselle, where did you hear this voice?" She pointed toward a shadowed alcove piled with broken chairs. "There, I think. It was so faint." Poirot moved to the spot, pushing aside the debris. Behind the pile, the wall was cracked, a thin fissure running vertically. He pressed his ear to it and tapped again. A faint reverberation answered. Not an echo, but something deeper, like a chamber beyond. "Interessant," he murmured. "Lord Ashwood, what lies behind this wall?" "Nothing," Ashwood said quickly. "Just foundation stone. The manor ends here. Does it?" Poirot's tone was sceptical. "We shall see, but for now—" A sharp clatter cut him off. The group turned as one to see Charles, grinning sheepishly, a toppled crate at his feet. "Oops," he said. "Thought I saw a rat." Beatrice glared. "Enough of this foolishness. Lawrence, lock this place up. We're wasting time." As they ascended, Poirot lingered, his gaze fixed on the cracked wall. Edmund's death, the footsteps, Thomas's disappearance, a voice from the void. The threads were tangling, but a pattern was emerging. The past, he sensed, was not as buried as the Ashwoods believed. Back in the hall, he turned to Ashwood. "One question more, monsieur. This Margaret, did she ever return?" Ashwood shook his head. "No, she vanished from our lives. Why?" "Because," Poirot said, his eyes narrowing, "sometimes the dead do not rest, and sometimes the living pretend they do. We shall speak again soon." As the family dispersed, Poirot's little grey cells hummed, The cellar held a secret, and the phantom footsteps were its voice. But whose hand pulled the strings? That he would uncover, step by echoing step. Chapter 5. A Game of Trust. The afternoon hung heavy over Ashwood Manor, the mist thickening into a fog that pressed against the windows like an uninvited guest. Hercule Poirot sat in the drawing-room, a cup of tea untouched before him, his sharp eyes flitting between the faces of the household. He had requested their presence, Lord Ashwood, Lady Beatrice, Charles, and Evelyn Grey, under the pretence of clarifying certain details. In truth, he wished to stir the pot and watch the ingredients rise. "Mes amis," Poirot began, his voice cutting through the crackle of the fire, "we are 5 days into this mystery, yet the phantom footsteps persist, and Thomas remains missing. Hercule Poirot does not believe in coincidence. Someone here knows more than they say." Lady Beatrice bristled, her teacup clattering against its saucer. "Are you accusing us, Monsieur Poirot? This is outrageous." "Not accusing," Poirot said smoothly, raising a hand. "Observing. The facts, they are stubborn. Footsteps with no source. A man vanished without trace. A cellar that whispers. These are not accidents. They are a performance, and every performance has a director." Charles leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, his smirk returning. "A performance, eh? Well, I'm flattered to be cast, but I'm no playwright. Maybe it's Uncle's guilty, conscience stomping about." "Charles," Ashwood snapped, his face flushing, "this is no time for your nonsense." "Is it nonsense?" Poirot interjected, his gaze piercing. "Lord Ashwood, you summoned me, yet you hesitate at every turn. Why, what do you fear I will uncover?" Ashwood's hands clenched into fists. "I've told you everything. The footsteps, Thomas's disappearance. I'm as baffled as you are." "Perhaps," Poirot said, tilting his head. "But bafflement does not explain your reluctance to speak of Edmund's death, or Margaret's. Departure. These are pieces of the puzzle you withhold." Beatrice's eyes narrowed. "You're grasping at straws, Poirot. Edmund's death was an accident, and Margaret left because she wanted to. There's no conspiracy here." Evelyn, who had been silent, spoke up, her voice trembling slightly. "But what if there is? Thomas didn't just leave, he was happy here, and those footsteps, they're not random. They stop at Lawrence's door every night." Ashwood turned to her, his expression a mix of surprise and irritation. "Evelyn, you're letting your imagination run wild." "Am I?" Joe countered, meeting his gaze. "I heard him, Lawrence. Thomas's voice from the cellar. You can't deny that." Charles laughed, a harsh sound that grated on the room's tension. "Oh, this is rich. Next you'll say Edmund's ghost is calling up from the grave, begging for justice." Poirot's moustache twitched. "Monsieur Charles, your levity is noted, but it hides something, no? You dismiss the footsteps, yet you hear them too. Why so quick to mock?" Charles's smirk faltered. "Because it's ridiculous. Ghosts' voices, utter rot. I'd rather believe Ellen's sneaking around than some spectral nonsense." "Ellen?" Poirot mused, tapping a finger against his chin. "The maid who trembles at shadows. And Mrs. Harrow, who insists Thomas fled. The servants, they too are part of this tableau. But let us return to the family. Lady Beatrice, you call Edmund's death an accident, yet you admit there were whispers of foul play. Who whispered?" Beatrice stiffened. Servants mostly. Idle gossip from idle minds. No one took it seriously. No one? Poirot pressed. Not even Margaret, who left so abruptly. She was distraught, Ashwood cut in. Edmund was her guardian. His death shook her. She married soon after and cut ties. That's all. Distraught, Poirot echoed. Or perhaps afraid. Afraid enough to flee a house where footsteps echo still. The room fell silent, the weight of his words settling like dust. Evelyn's hands twisted in her lap. Charles stared at the fire, and Ashwood's jaw worked soundlessly. Beatrice, however, rose abruptly, her voice icy. "I've had enough of this charade," she said. "You're turning us against each other, Poirot, and I won't stand for it. Good day." She swept out, the door slamming behind her. Ashwood rubbed his face, exhaustion etching deeper lines into his features. "She's right, you know. You're making us suspect one another." "Bon," Poirot said, unperturbed. "Suspicion is the seed of truth. When trust crumbles, secrets spill. Tell me, Monsieur Charles, where were you last night when the footsteps sounded?" Charles blinked, caught off guard. "In bed, where else? Probably snoring through your little midnight vigil. And you, Mademoiselle Gray?" Evelyn hesitated. I was awake. I heard them, then went to the corridor. That's when I saw you." Poirot nodded, filing away her words. "And you, Lord Ashwood?" "In my study," he said curtly. "I couldn't sleep. I heard them too, same as always." "Interessant," Poirot murmured. "All awake, all hearing, yet no one sees. A curious dance. This phantom leads us in." Charles stood, stretching with exaggerated nonchalance. "Well, I'm done dancing. Call me when you catch your ghost, Poirot." As he sauntered out, Evelyn lingered, her eyes meeting Poirot's. "Do you really think one of us is behind it?" she whispered. "Perhaps," Poirot replied gently. "Or perhaps we are all pawns in a game we do not yet understand. Return to your day, mademoiselle. I have much to consider." Alone with Ashwood, Poirot leaned forward. "One final question, monsieur. The land dispute with Harrow, did it involve Edmund?" Ashwood flinched. "Yes. Edmund sold Harrow's family land to pay his debts. It caused bad blood, but that was decades ago." "Decades," Poirot said, "yet echoes linger. Merci, Lord Ashwood. We shall speak again." As Ashwood retreated, Poirot sat back, his little grey cells buzzing. The family was a knot of mistrust. Beatrice's defensiveness, Charles's deflection, Evelyn's fear, Ashwood's reticence, and beyond them, the servants and a shadowed past. The phantom footsteps were a thread, tugging at a tapestry of lies. But which hand held the needle? Outside, the fog thickened, muffling the world. Inside, Poirot smiled faintly. The game of trust had begun, and he intended to win. Chapter 6. The Midnight Chase. The clock in Ashwood Manor's hall struck midnight, its chimes rolling through the house like a summons. Hercule Poirot stood in the upper corridor, clad in his dressing gown, but wide awake, his cane gripped firmly in one hand. The day's tensions had coiled the household tight, and he sensed the phantom would not disappoint tonight. His plan was simple: to hear the footsteps again, and this time to follow them. The manor was silent, save for the occasional creak of timber and the distant patter of rain against the panes. Poirot positioned himself near Lord Ashwood's door, where the footsteps had paused each night. A small table held a lantern, unlit, for now he preferred the dark, trusting his ears over his eyes in this game of shadows. Minutes ticked by, marked by the soft tick of his pocket watch. Then, as the final chime faded, it began. Tap, tap, tap. The sound was unmistakable, slow, heavy, deliberate, echoing from the far end of the corridor. Poirot's pulse quickened, though his expression remained serene. He stepped forward, silent as a cat, his ears tracing the rhythm. The footsteps grew louder, approaching Ashwood's door, then paused. A faint creak followed, as if weight shifted on the floorboards. Poirot sprang into action. He flung open Ashwood's door, expecting to catch the culprit mid-step, but the room was empty. Ashwood asleep, snoring softly beneath his blankets. The footsteps resumed, retreating now, faster than before. Poirot snatched the lantern, lit it with a match, and gave chase. The corridor stretched ahead, its shadows leaping as the lantern swayed. The tap-tap-tap echoed ahead, leading him past closed doors and faded portraits. He moved swiftly for a man of his stature, his cane tapping in counterpoint to the phantom's rhythm. At the landing, the sound veered left, toward the servants' wing. "Arrêtez!" Poirot called, his voice sharp in the stillness, but the footsteps only quickened. He followed, descending a narrow stair, the air growing colder and damper with each step. The sound darted through the servants' passage, past the kitchen, and toward a back door leading to the grounds. Poirot burst outside, the fog swallowing him whole. The lantern's glow barely pierced the murk, but the footsteps continued, tap, 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 fainter now, heading toward the stables. He pressed on, his breath misting in the chill, his shoes sinking into the wet grass. The stables loomed ahead, a dark silhouette against the grey. The sound stopped abruptly, as if the phantom had vanished into the ether. Poirot reached the stable doors, his lantern illuminating the muddy ground. No footprints marred the earth, no trace of boots, no sign of passage. He stepped inside, the scent of hay and leather thick in the air. Horses nickered softly, their eyes glinting in the light, but the stalls were empty of human presence. "Impossible," Poirot muttered, turning in a slow circle. The footsteps had led him here, yet the trail ended in a void. He examined the floor, dry straw, no mud tracked in. The walls were solid, the loft above silent. A dead end, or so it seemed. A faint rustle drew his attention to a corner, where a tarp covered a pile of old tack. Poirot approached, lifting the cloth with his cane. Beneath lay a coil of rope, billet, rusted pitchfork, and a single black glove, its leather worn but intact. He picked it up with a handkerchief, noting a faint stain on the cuff. Blood? Mud? Too dark to tell. "Curieux," he said, pocketing the glove. "A phantom who leaves gifts." The return to the manor was slow, the fog pressing closer, muffling even his own footsteps. Inside, the house was still, though a light flickered under the kitchen door. Poirot eased it open to find Ellen, the maid, hunched over a cup of tea, her face pale as moonlight. "Monsieur Poirot!" she gasped, nearly spilling her drink. "What are you doing up?" "Chasing shadows," he replied, setting the lantern down. "And you, Mademoiselle Ellen? Why do you sit alone at such an hour?" She swallowed hard, her hands trembling. "I couldn't sleep. Not after. I heard them again, the footsteps. They went past my room, down the back stairs." Poirot leaned forward, his voice gentle but firm. "And did you see who made them?" "No," she whispered. "I was too afraid to look. But they were fast this time, like they were running." "Running," Poirot echoed, his mind racing. "From me, perhaps? Tell me, Ellen, this glove, do you recognize it?" He produced it from his pocket, holding it in the lantern's glow. Her eyes widened. That's Thomas's. He wore gloves like that when he polished the silver. Where did you find it?" "In the stables," Poirot said, watching her closely. "Left behind by our phantom, perhaps." Ellen shook her head, tears welling. "He's not gone, is he? Something's happened to him, I know it." "Calme-toi," Poirot soothed. "We shall find the truth. Go to your rest now. Say nothing of this to the others." She nodded, fleeing the kitchen with her shawl clutched tight. Poirot remained, turning the glove over in his hands. Thomas's glove, abandoned in a stable, the footsteps had led him to. Yet no tracks, no figure. The phantom was clever, but not invisible. It had faltered tonight, leaving a clue. Back in his room, Poirot sat by the window, the fog a blank canvas beyond. The chase had yielded more questions than answers, but the glove was a thread, tugging at the fabric of the mystery. Someone in this house was playing a dangerous game, and Hercule Poirot was closing in, step by silent step. Chapter 7. The Locked Diary. The morning sun struggled through the fog, casting a wan light over Ashwood Manor. Hercule Poirot sat at the breakfast table, his tea cooling as he turned Thomas's glove over in his hands. The household was late to rise after the night's disturbances. Lord Ashwood nursing a headache in his study, Lady Beatrice cloistered in her rooms, Charles nowhere to be seen, and Evelyn absent, perhaps still shaken by the midnight echoes. Poirot welcomed the solitude. It gave his little grey cells room to work. The glove was a puzzle piece, worn leather, a faint stain, abandoned in the stables where the phantom's trail had vanished. It tied Thomas to the mystery. But how? Had he fled, as Mrs. Harrow claimed, or met a darker fate, as Ellen feared? Poirot's chase had proven the footsteps were no illusion, yet their maker remained a shadow. A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. Evelyn Grey entered, her auburn hair hastily pinned, her eyes shadowed with fatigue. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, hesitating at the threshold, "I found something. I thought you should see it." "Bon," Poirot replied, rising with a nod. "What is this discovery, mademoiselle?" She beckoned him to follow, leading him upstairs to a small sitting-room off the main corridor. The space was cluttered with faded furniture. A chaise-longue, a writing desk, a bookshelf sagging under dusty volumes. Evelyn knelt by the desk, prying open a drawer with a hairpin. "I was looking for a pen," she explained, "and this stuck. I forced it, and found this." From the drawer, she produced a slim leather-bound book, its cover cracked with age, a tiny brass lock securing its pages. Poirot took it, his fingers tracing the worn edges. "A diary, perhaps?" "I think so," Evelyn said, "but it's locked and I didn't want to break it. It was hidden under a false bottom. Someone didn't want it found." "Très intéressant," Poirot murmured, his eyes gleaming. "And you have no key?" She shook her head. "None that I know of, but look at the spine. There's an initial, M." Poirot's pulse quickened. As in Margaret, perhaps. The cousin who fled after Edmund's death. Evelyn nodded. It could be hers. This room. It was hers once, before she left. Lawrence told me that years ago. Magnifique, Poirot said, pocketing the diary. You have done well, mademoiselle. This may be the voice of the past we seek. Leave it with me. I shall coax its secrets forth. Back in his room, Poirot set to work. From his travelling case, he retrieved a small leather pouch of tools, lockpicks, a magnifying glass, a delicate screwdriver, a gentleman's kit for a detective's trade. The lock was simple, rusted with disuse, and yielded after a few deft twists. The diary sprang open, its pages yellowed but intact, the ink faded yet legible. The first entry was dated July 12th, 1895. 30 years prior, Edmund grows stranger by the day. He speaks of the manor as a living thing, a guardian of our name. Tonight he locked himself in the cellar again, muttering about debts and promises. I fear for him, and for us. Poirot turned the pages, scanning Margaret's neat script. The hue entries painted a portrait of a man unravelling. Edmund Ashwood, obsessed with legacy, drowning in financial ruin. A later entry from September 3rd, 1895, caught his eye. He sold the Harrow land today. Old man Harrow came, shouting threats, vowing revenge. Edmund laughed, said the manor would protect us. But I saw fear in his eyes. Something is wrong here. Something he won't speak of. The final entry, dated October 15th, 1895, the night of Edmund's death, chilled Poirot's blood. He's gone too far. I heard him in the cellar, arguing, with whom I don't know. Then a cry, a thud. I ran down, but the door was locked. When they broke, it opened, he was dead. They say he fell, but I saw the marks, scratches on the wall, as if he fought. Someone was with him. I must leave this place. I cannot bear the silence that follows the echoes. Poirot closed the diary, his mind racing. Scratches on the wall, evidence of struggle erased by time or design. Margaret's fear had driven her away, but her words lingered, a whisper from the grave. Edmund's death was no accident, and the phantom footsteps might be its echo. He sought out Evelyn, finding her in the garden, bundled against the damp. "Mademoiselle," he said, holding up the diary, "your find is a treasure." Margaret believed Edmund was murdered. The cellar holds the key, those scratches, they may yet remain. Evelyn's eyes widened. Murdered? But who? That, Poirot said, is what we must discover. The footsteps, Thomas's fate, they are tied to this past. Come, we return to the cellar. With a lantern in hand, they descended once more into the dank depths. Poirot moved to the spot where Edmund had fallen, examining the walls with his magnifying glass. The stone was rough, weathered, but there, near the base, faint lines gleamed in the light, scratches, shallow but deliberate, as if nails had clawed in desperation. Voila, Poirot breathed. Margaret spoke true. He fought for his life here. Evelyn shivered. But how does this connect to now? To Thomas? Poirot straightened, his expression grim. Someone knows this secret, someone who uses the footsteps to frighten or to warn. The glove in the stables, the voice you heard, these are not separate threads, but one tapestry. We must unravel it. As they climbed back to the light, a shadow moved in the hall above. Brief, fleeting, gone before Poirot could turn. He smiled faintly. The phantom was watching, and the game was shifting. The diary had opened a door to the past. Now, Poirot, it would force it wide. Chapter 8. Masquerade of Motives. The dining room of Ashwood Manor glowed with candlelight that evening, the flickering flames casting long shadows across the table. Hercule Poirot had insisted on a formal dinner, a gathering of the household. Lord Ashwood, Lady Beatrice, Charles, Evelyn Grey, and, at his request, the servants Ellen and Mrs. Harrow. His purpose was clear: to shake the tree and see what fell. The diary's revelations burned in his mind, and the phantom's game could no longer be played in the dark. The meal began in strained silence, the clink of cutlery against porcelain the only sound. Poirot sat at one end, his posture impeccable, his eyes darting between the faces around him. Lord Ashwood picked at his roast, his brow furrowed. Beatrice sliced her meat with icy precision, her lips a thin line. Charles slouched, swirling his wine, while Evelyn sat rigid, her gaze fixed on her plate. Ellen hovered near the sideboard, trembling as she poured water, and Mrs. Harrow stood by the door, arms crossed, her expression dour. "Mes amis," Poirot began, his voice cutting through the tension like a blade. "Tonight we dine together, not for pleasure, but for truth. The phantom footsteps, Thomas's disappearance, the echoes of Edmund's death, they bind us all. Hercule Poirot has seen much, and now I ask you to speak." Charles snorted, raising his glass. "A toast to the great detective, then? What's your theory, Poirot? Ghostly revenge? A butler with a grudge?" "No," Poirot replied, unruffled. "No ghost, no butler. A living hand guides this mystery. And that hand, it sits among us." Beatrice's fork clattered to her plate. "This is absurd. You've turned our home into a circus, Poirot. I won't sit here and be accused." "Accused?" Poirot tilted his head. "I accuse no one yet. But let us examine the facts. Edmund Ashwood died in the cellar, not by accident, but by violence. His ward Margaret fled in fear, leaving a diary that speaks of murder. Now, footsteps echo where he fell, and Thomas vanishes. Why? What stirs this past to life?" Ashwood's face paled. "Margaret's diary? Where did you get that?" "Hidden," Poirot said, "and found by chance or fate. It reveals scratches on the cellar wall, marks of a struggle. Someone killed Edmund, and someone now uses his death to haunt this house." Evelyn's voice trembled as she spoke. "But who? And why take Thomas?" "A fine question," Poirot said, turning to her. "The glove I found in the stables. It is Thomas's, left by the phantom I chased last night. Perhaps he lives, perhaps not. But his fate is a thread in this web." Mrs. Harrow stepped forward, her voice gruff. "I told you, he ran off. That glove means nothing. Could have been there for days." "Days?" Poirot's eyebrows rose, yet the straw beneath it was dry, the mud outside fresh. "No, Madame Harrow, it was placed recently. And your husband's land was stolen by Edmund. Did that grudge die with him?" Her face darkened. "You've got no right to drag my Jim into this. I've served this family 20 years, loyal every day." "Loyalty," Poirot mused, "or penance? The past festers, madame," Ellen whimpered, drawing all eyes. I heard him, I swear. Thomas, calling from the cellar. He's not gone. He's trapped. Trapped. Charles laughed harshly. Next you'll say he's walled up down. There, like some Gothic tale. Enough! Ashwood slammed his fist on the table, rattling the silver. This is madness, Poirot. You're tearing us apart with wild guesses. Guesses? Poirot's tone sharpened. No, monsieur. Observations. You who summoned me, yet hide Edmund's secrets. Lady Beatrice, who dismisses whispers she but once heard. Charles, who mocks yet knows more than he admits. Evelyn, who hears voices others deny. And the servants, one terrified, one defiant. Each of you wears a mask. Tonight they slip. Beatrice rose, her chair scraping back. I've had enough. Lawrence, put an end to this. Sit, Beatrice, Ashwood snapped, surprising her into compliance. He's right. We're all hiding something. I knew Edmund's death was strange. The servants talked, but father hushed it up. I never asked why. Poirot nodded. And you, Charles? Where were you when the footsteps ran last night? Charles smirked, though it wavered. In bed, as I said. You're the one playing fox and hounds, Poirot. Perhaps, Poirot said, but the hounds close in. Evelyn, you heard a voice. Mrs. Harrow, you deny it. Ellen, you confirm it. A chorus of contradiction, yet one truth sings beneath. The room erupted. Beatrice accused Ashwood of cowardice. Charles taunted Ellen's tears. Mrs. Harrow barked at Poirot's insolence, and Evelyn pleaded for calm. Amid the chaos, Poirot stood, his voice rising like a conductor's baton. Silence, he commanded, and the din ceased. This masquerade ends soon. The phantom thinks to outwit Hercule Poirot, but I see the strings. Tomorrow I descend to the cellar again, with tools, with light. The wall that whispers will speak. Ashwood's hands trembled. What do you expect to find? The past, Poirot said, and perhaps the present. Bonne nuit, mes amis. Sleep if you can. As the group dispersed, their voices a low buzz of recrimination, Poirot lingered, his gaze on the flickering candles. The dinner had cracked the facade. Fear, guilt, defiance spilled forth. The phantom's motive was still veiled, but its mask was fraying. Tomorrow he would strike the wall and shatter the silence. Outside, the fog pressed closer, muffling the night. Inside, the little grey cells danced. The game was afoot, and Poirot held the next move. Chapter 9. The Phantom's Mark. The fog had lifted by morning, leaving Ashwood Manor bathed in a cold, pale light that seeped through the windows like a reluctant guest. Hercule Poirot stood in the grand hall, his travelling case open at his feet, a small hammer and chisel in hand. The dinner had ignited a fire beneath the household. Tensions simmered. Eyes darted with suspicion. But Poirot's focus was singular. The cellar wall that whispered secrets. Today he would force it to speak. Lord Ashwood joined him, his face haggard, a lantern swinging from his grip. You're certain about this, Poirot? Breaking into the foundation? It's madness. Madness, no. Poirot replied, adjusting his coat. Method. The scratches in the cellar, Margaret's diary, the voice Mademoiselle Evelyn heard, these point to a truth hidden beyond that wall. We shall uncover it. Evelyn appeared next, her shawl tight around her shoulders, determination in her eyes. I'm coming too. If Thomas is there, I need to know." Ashwood hesitated, then nodded. "Very well, but the others, Beatrice, Charles, they won't approve." "Let them disapprove," Poirot said with a faint smile. The truth does not wait for permission. The trio descended into the cellar, the air growing thick with damp and decay. The lantern's glow danced across the stone, illuminating the cracked wall Poirot had marked the day before. He knelt, running a gloved finger along the fissure. "Here," he said, tapping the chisel against the stone. "The echo yesterday, it suggests a hollow. We break through." Ashwood set the lantern down, his reluctance palpable. "If you're wrong, this is vandalism." "If I am wrong," Poirot countered, "you may send me the bill. But Hercule Poirot is rarely wrong." He struck the chisel with the hammer, a sharp crack reverberating through the cellar. Chips of stone fell away, revealing a seam wider than expected. Another blow, then another. The wall yielded, crumbling into a jagged hole just large enough for a man to peer through. Dust swirled in the lantern's beam as Poirot leaned forward, his breath catching. "Mon Dieu," he whispered. Beyond the wall lay a narrow chamber, its floor littered with debris, broken bottles, rusted tools, a tattered blanket. But it was the centre that drew his gaze. A footprint, stark and solitary, pressed into a patch of dust. Not fresh, but preserved, as if time had frozen it there. The tread was heavy, distinct. A man's boot, larger than Thomas's glove suggested. Evelyn gasped, clutching Ashwood's arm. "What is that? Whose is it?" Poirot stepped back, his mind racing. "A mark," he said, "left by one who stood here long ago. See the dust. It is undisturbed save for this print. No one has entered since it was made." Ashwood's voice trembled. "Edmund? Could it be his?" "Non," Poirot said, shaking his head. "Edmund fell outside this wall, scratched it as he died. This print, it belongs to his killer, trapped here by chance when the wall was sealed." "Sealed?" Evelyn's eyes widened. "You mean someone built this after he died?" "Précisément," Poirot said. "To hide something, or someone. The phantom footsteps, they mimic this past, but why? And how?" He reached through the hole, brushing the dust with his handkerchief. The footprints' edges were crisp, the sole worn at the heel, a detail to remember. As he withdrew, his hand grazed something cold and metallic. He tugged, and a small object clattered to the floor, a brass button, tarnished but intact, engraved with a faint H. "Harrow," Ashwood breathed, staring at it. That's from a tenant's coat. Old man Harrow wore buttons. Like that. He worked the land before Edmund sold it. Poirot pocketed the button, his expression grim. A clue from the grave. Harrow was here, in this chamber, the night Edmund died. Margaret heard an argument. Perhaps it ended in murder. "But Harrow's dead," Evelyn said, her voice shaking. "He can't be the phantom." "Non," Poirot agreed, "but his shadow lingers. This chamber, it was sealed to bury the truth, yet someone knows it still." A sudden noise above, a sharp cry cut off mid-breath, jolted them from their discovery. Ashwood grabbed the lantern, and they hurried up the stairs, emerging into the hall to find Ellen crumpled near the kitchen door, her face ashen. "Ellen!" Evelyn knelt beside her. "What happened?" The maid pointed a trembling finger towards the back stairs. I saw him, Thomas, standing there, all pale and still. Then he was gone. Poirot's eyes narrowed. Where, précisément? Gestured weakly. The servants' passage, near the stables. Without a word, Poirot strode toward the back door, Ashwood and Evelyn trailing behind. The passage was dim, the air heavy with the scent of rain-soaked wood. At the far end, near the stable entrance, a faint smear of mud marked the floor. Fresh, wet, unmistakable. Thomas? Evelyn whispered, hope and fear warring in her voice. Or his ghost, Ashwood muttered. Neither, Poirot said, crouching to examine the smear. A living man walked here moments ago. The mud, it matches the ground outside. Our phantom grows careless. He rose, his gaze fixed on the stable doors. The footprint in the chamber, Harrow's button, Thomas's glove, Ellen's sighting. The pieces were aligning, a pattern emerging from the chaos. The phantom's mark was no longer just an echo. It was a trail, and Poirot intended to follow it to its source. Return to the house, he told Ashwood and Evelyn. Say nothing of this yet. The net tightens, and the prey must not know. They retreated. Poirot lingered, the mud a silent witness beneath his feet. The past had left its print, but the present was stepping into the light. The phantom's masquerade was nearing its final act. Chapter 10. Echoes of the Past. The afternoon shadows stretched long across Ashwood Manor, the air thick with the promise of rain. Hercule Poirot stood in the drawing-room, his hands clasped. Behind his back, the brass button and Thomas's glove laid out on the table before him like evidence in a courtroom. The footprint in the sealed chamber, Ellen's sighting of a pale figure, the mud in the servants' passage. The threads were weaving into a tapestry, and Poirot was ready to pull the final stitch. He had summoned the household once more. Lord Ashwood, Lady Beatrice, Charles, Evelyn, Ellen, and Mrs. Harrow, under the guise of an update. They filed in, their faces a gallery of unease. Ashwood weary, Beatrice defiant, Charles smirking, Evelyn anxious, Ellen trembling, and Mrs. Harrow stony. The tension was a palpable thing, coiling tighter with each step. Mes amis, Poirot began, his voice calm but commanding. The time for games is over. The phantom footsteps have led us on a dance. But tonight, Hercule Poirot ends it. I have seen the past in the cellar. A footprint, a button, a murder, concealed. I have chased the present through fog and shadow. Now, I set a trap. Beatrice's eyes flashed. A trap? What nonsense is this, Poirot? No nonsense, he replied, holding up the button. This, engraved with an H, fell from a coat worn by old man Harrow, the man who argued with Edmund Ashwood the night he died. A hidden chamber, sealed after his death, held his mark, a footprint in dust. Edmund was murdered, and the killer's secret buried with him. Ashwood's hands shook. Harrow? But he died years later. Natural causes. Oui, Poirot said, but his act echoes. The phantom footsteps mimic that night, stopping at your door, monsieur. Why? To frighten you, or to warn you? Charles leaned forward, his smirk fading. So, you're saying some ghost of Harrow's stomping about? That's mad. Non, Poirot countered. Not a ghost, a living soul using the past as a weapon. Thomas's glove, found in the stables, ties him to this. Ellen saw him today, pale and still, yet mud marked his path. He lives, but he is part of the masquerade. Ellen gasped, tears spilling. "I knew it! He's alive, but where?" "That," Poirot said, "we discover tonight. The phantom grows bold, leaving traces. I propose a vigil, not passive, but active. We wait in the cellar, near the broken wall, with lights dimmed. When the footsteps come, we strike." Beatrice scoffed. "You expect us to sit in that damp hole, waiting for your phantom?" "No, madame," Poirot said. "Only those I choose. Lord Ashwood, Evelyn, and myself. The rest you remain here under watch. The servants, too. No one leaves this room." Harrow bristled. "Watch? You think I'm sneaking about, making noises?" "I think," Poirot said evenly, "that someone knows more than they admit. The trap is set. Refuse, and suspicion falls heavier." A murmur of protest rippled through the group, but Ashwood raised a hand. "Enough! I want this ended. I'll go, Poirot." Evelyn nodded, her voice firm. "So will I." The others relented, grudgingly agreeing to stay. As night fell, Poirot, Ashwood, and Evelyn descended to the cellar, a single lantern casting a faint glow. They positioned themselves near the breached wall, the jagged hole a silent witness to their vigil. Poirot extinguished the light, plunging them into darkness, his cane ready in his grip. "Silence," he whispered. "We listen." The minutes stretched into an hour. The only sound their shallow breaths and the drip of water somewhere deep in the stone. Then, just past midnight, it came. Tap, 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 slow and deliberate, echoing from above. Poirot's hand tightened on his cane as the footsteps descended, growing louder, nearer. They stopped outside the cellar door. A faint creak followed, the door easing open. Poirot held his breath, signalling Ashwood and Evelyn to stay still. A shadow moved in the gloom, boots scuffing the stone steps. The figure paused at the bottom, a silhouette against the faint moonlight seeping from above. "Now!" Poirot shouted, striking a match and igniting the lantern. Light flooded the cellar, revealing a man, pale, dishevelled, his coat torn. Thomas, the missing valet, stood blinking in the glare, a startled cry escaping his lips. "Thomas!" Evelyn rushed forward, but Poirot held her back. "Attendez," he said sharply. "Explain yourself, monsieur. Why do you haunt this house?" Thomas staggered, his voice hoarse. I didn't mean to. They made me. Locked me in the stables, told me to walk at night, to scare him." He pointed at Ashwood, who stared, dumbfounded. "Who?" Poirot demanded. "Who commands you?" Thomas's eyes darted to the stairs, fear etching his face. "I can't. She'll—" A thud interrupted him, a heavy object rolling down the steps. It landed at their feet, a rusted iron ring, the one Poirot had seen embedded in the cellar wall days before. A distraction. Before he could react, Thomas bolted, scrambling up the stairs and vanishing into the night. "After him!" Ashwood shouted, but Poirot shook his head. "No," he said, picking up the ring. "He is a pawn. The master moves above. Return to the drawing-room, quickly." They raced upstairs, bursting into the room where the others waited. Beatrice, Charles, Ellen, and Mrs. Harrow sat in tense silence, except for one empty chair. Where is Charles? Poirot demanded. Beatrice frowned. He stepped out, said he needed air, moments ago. Poirot's eyes narrowed. Air? Or escape? The trap has sprung, but the prey shifts. To the stables, now! The echoes of the past had spoken, and the present was running. Poirot's net was closing, but the final twist loomed just beyond his grasp. Chapter 11. The Final Step. The night air bit at Hercule Poirot's face as he led the charge toward the stables, his cane striking the gravel with purpose. Lord Ashwood, Evelyn, and a reluctant Lady Beatrice followed, their breaths misting in the chill. The drawing-room's empty chair, Charles's absence, had ignited Poirot's suspicions, and Thomas's panicked flight pointed the trail back to the shadows where the glove had been found. The phantom's mask was slipping, and Poirot intended to rip it away. The stable doors loomed ahead, ajar, a sliver of lantern light spilling from within. Poirot slowed, signalling the others to hush. A low murmur drifted out. Two voices, tense and urgent. He crept closer, peering through the gap. Inside, Thomas knelt by a hay bale, his hands bound with rope, his face bruised. Standing over him was Charles, his smirk replaced by a snarl, a pitchfork gripped in one hand. "You idiot!" Charles hissed. "You were supposed to stay hidden, scare them, not lead them to me." "I didn't mean to," Thomas whimpered. "They caught me. I had no choice." Poirot stepped forward, flinging the doors wide. "Bonsoir, Monsieur Charles," he said, his voice cutting through the night. "The game ends here." Charles whirled, the pitchfork raised, his eyes wild. "Poirot, you meddling fool! Stay back!" Ashwood pushed past, his face a mask of fury. "Charles, you? What is this madness?" "Madness." Charles laughed, a brittle sound. "Justice, uncle. You and this cursed house, you've sat on lies for too long." Poirot raised a hand, his tone calm but steel-edged. "Explain, monsieur. The footsteps, Thomas's captivity, why?" Charles lowered the pitchfork slightly, his gaze darting between them. "Edmund's death. It wasn't an accident. Harrow killed him, yes, but grandfather covered it up. Sealed the chamber, paid off the whispers. I found Margaret's diary years ago in the attic. Knew the truth. You profited from that land, uncle. Built your life on blood." Ashwood staggered. "I was a child. I knew nothing." "Liar!" Charles spat. "You knew enough to keep quiet. I wanted you to feel it, the fear, the guilt. Thomas was my tool. Locked him in the stables, made him walk at night. The footsteps were Edmund's echo, haunting you." Valdegred's voice shook. "But why hurt Thomas? He's innocent," Charles sneered. "Collateral. He got cold feet, tried to run. I had to keep him in line." Poirot stepped closer, his eyes locked on Charles. And the voice from the cellar. "The mud. You overplayed your hand." "That was me," a new voice rasped. Mrs. Harrow emerged from the shadows behind a stall, her apron twisted in her hands, her face a storm of guilt. "I knew what my Jim did. Heard him confess it before he died. Charles came to me last year, showed me the diary, said we'd make it right." "Make it right?" Beatrice snapped, her composure cracking. "By terrorizing us? By exposing you," Mrs. Harrow said, her voice breaking. "Jim killed Edmund for the land. Your family took everything. I helped Charles, mimicked Jim's voice in the cellar, used the old passages. But it went too far. Poirot's moustache twitched. "Passages? Show me." Mrs. Harrow pointed to a trapdoor beneath a pile of hay. "There, connects to the cellar. Jim used it to escape that night, after Edmund fell." Poirot knelt, lifting the trapdoor. A narrow tunnel yawned below, its walls damp and crumbling. "Voilà," he said, "the phantom's path. You, Madame, and Charles. A duet of vengeance." Charles lunged suddenly, shoving Thomas aside and bolting for the trapdoor. "I'm not done yet," he shouted, diving into the dark. "Stop him!" Ashwood yelled, but Poirot held up a hand. "Non," he said, his voice steady. "He runs to his own trap." Moments later, a muffled cry echoed from below, followed by a thud. Poirot descended the ladder, lantern in hand, the others trailing. At the tunnel's end, Charles lay sprawled against the cellar wall. The same breached chamber, his leg twisted beneath him, a rusted iron bar fallen from the ceiling, pinning him down. "Foolish," Poirot said, crouching beside him. "The past catches all who chase it blindly." Charles groaned, defiance fading. "I wanted justice." "Justice," Poirot said, "is not yours to wield. You terrorized, you imprisoned. Your cause is lost." Ashwood stared at his nephew, horror and pity warring in his eyes. "Why, Charles, why not tell me?" "You'd have buried it again," Charles muttered, wincing. "Like always." Mrs. Harrow sank to her knees, tears streaming. "I'm sorry, my lord. I let hate twist me." Poirot rose, dusting his hands. "The final step is taken. Thomas lives, the footsteps cease. The law will judge you both." As Evelyn untied Thomas, who wept with relief, and Ashwood called for help, Poirot stepped back, the lantern's glow illuminating the chamber's footprint one last time. Yofour, phantom, had been unmasked. Charles and Mrs. Harrow, driven by a decades-old wound. But a deeper truth lingered, a twist yet unspoken, whispering in the silence. Chapter 12. Resolution in Silence. The morning sun pierced the lingering fog, bathing Ashwood Manor in a light that felt almost foreign after days of shadow. Hercule Poirot stood in the grand hall, his suitcase packed, his hat perched precisely atop his head. The household gathered around him. Lord Ashwood, Lady Beatrice, Evelyn Grey, Ellen, and a hobbled Thomas, his wrists bandaged from the ropes. Charles and Mrs. Harrow were absent, confined to their rooms under guard, awaiting the constabulary summoned from the village. The phantom's reign had ended, but Poirot's work was not yet complete. "Mes amis," he began, his voice resonant. "In the stillness, the mystery of the phantom footsteps is solved, yet the story demands its final telling. Gather close. Hercule Poirot shall illuminate all." Ashwood rubbed his face, exhaustion etched deep. "You've caught them, Poirot. Charles and Mrs. Harrow. What more is there?" "Much," Poirot said, his eyes gleaming. "The surface is clear. Charles, driven by Margaret's diary, sought to punish you, monsieur, for a legacy built on Edmund's blood. Mrs. Harrow, haunted by her husband's crime, joined him, mimicking old man Harrow's voice, guiding Thomas to walk the night. But the little grey cells, they see deeper. There is a twist, a truth beneath the truth." Evelyn frowned, stepping closer. "A twist? What do you mean?" Poirot clasped his hands behind his back, pacing a small circle. Let us reconstruct. Edmund Ashwood died in 1895, killed by Harrow over the land dispute. The chamber was sealed, hiding Harrow's footprint and button, proof of his guilt. Margaret fled, leaving her diary. Charles found it years later, and with Mrs. Harrow staged the footsteps to torment you, Lord Ashwood. Thomas, coerced, was their puppet, locked in the stables, forced to pace the corridors via the secret passage. All this we know. Beatrice crossed her arms. Then why drag it out? It's finished. Non, madame, Poirot said, turning to her. It is not finished until the final mask falls. Consider. Charles's plan was clever, but flawed. The footsteps stopped at your brother's door. Why not yours, Lady Beatrice? Why not the whole house? And Mrs. Harrow, her voice in the cellar was a perfect echo of Harrow's. Yet she faltered when pressed. Why? Thomas shifted, his voice weak. They told me to scare his lordship. Said it was about the past. I didn't ask more. Précisément, Poirot said. You were a tool, Monsieur Thomas. But tools do not choose their masters. Charles and Mrs. Harrow were not alone in this. A gasp rippled through the group. Ashwood's eyes widened. Not alone? Who else? Poirot paused, his gaze sweeping the room, then settling on Evelyn. Mademoiselle Gray, you found the diary, hidden in a drawer, you said. A fortunate discovery, non? Evelyn paled, her hands twisting in her shawl. Yes, I told you, it was chance. Chance, Poirot echoed. Or design. You heard. Thomas's voice in the cellar guided me to it. You urged the search, pushed the trap. Your fear seemed real, yet your actions were too precise. What are you saying? Beatrice snapped. Evelyn's a victim, not a villain. Am I? Evelyn's voice was soft, but it cut through the din. She straightened, her auburn hair catching the light, her eyes suddenly sharp. You're right, Monsieur Poirot. I was no victim. Ashwood staggered back. Evelyn, we, Poirot said, nodding. Mademoiselle Evelyn Gray, or should I say, Evelyn Ashwood, daughter of Margaret Ashwood, who fled this house in fear. The portrait in the corridor, your mother's face, your hair. You came here not as a ward, but as a shadow of vengeance. Evelyn's lips curved into a faint, bitter smile. Clever, Poirot. Yes, I'm Margaret's daughter. She told me everything, Edmund's murder, the cover-up, the guilt that drove her mad. She died broken, and I swore to make them pay. Ellen whimpered, clutching Thomas's arm, but Poirot pressed on. You orchestrated this, mademoiselle. Charles found the diary, yes, but you planted it for him, knowing his temper, his resentment. You whispered to Mrs. Harrow, stoking her hate. You guided Thomas's steps, ensured I found the glove, the chamber, all to expose the truth. Evelyn nodded, unrepentant. I wanted Lawrence to confess, to admit what his family did. Charles was my hammer, Mrs. Harrow my voice. I stayed in the background, watching it unfold. Ashwood's voice broke. Why not tell me, Evelyn? I'd have listened. Would you? She retorted. You buried it once. I had to force it out, make you feel the weight. Poirot raised a hand, and so the final twist. The phantom was threefold. Charles the actor, Mrs. Harrow the echo, Evelyn the mind. The footsteps were your mother's cry, mademoiselle, given form. Beatrice stared at Evelyn, horror dawning. You lived with us, ate with us, and all this time. Yes, Evelyn said simply. I played my part. Poirot stepped forward, his tone softening. The law will decide your fate, all three of you. Charles and Mrs. Harrow for their deeds, you for your design. But the truth is free. Edmund's murder is known, the past laid bare. Ashwood sank into a chair, head in hands. What have we become? A family of echoes, Poirot said gently. But now, silence heals. As the constabulary arrived, Evelyn met Poirot's gaze, a flicker of respect in her eyes. You saw through me, monsieur. I didn't expect that. Hercule Poirot sees all, he replied, tipping his hat. Adieu, mademoiselle. The hall emptied, officers leading Evelyn, Charles, and Mrs. Harrow away. Thomas and Ellen retreated to recover, Beatrice to her solitude. Ashwood remained, staring at the portraits lining the walls, his ancestors, now stripped of their secrets. Poirot picked up his suitcase, stepping into the sunlight. The manor stood quiet, its footsteps stilled, its shadows lifted. The case was closed, the resolution bittersweet. A 10 of 10, he mused, for the little grey cells had triumphed once more.